Look at the data in column A, where you'll see trailing minuses. Some software indicates negatives in that style. When it comes into Excel, typically it's turned into a text entry. And if we try to perform any kind of mathematical operation on a cell like that, for example, if I attempt to use that value in A2, at least it looks like a value and double it, we get something like this. And that's not very helpful. In fact, it's not helpful at all. What we need to do is effectively get rid of the trailing minus, but actually make it keep its negative meaning. We'd like it to look the way it does right here in B2, but we actually want to show how you can do this by using various text functions. If you're familiar with how to isolate characters within cells, you'll know that it's the rightmost character here that we need to pull out. The other text function that's going to come into play here is one that simply tells us the length of an entry. Now, in an isolated example, this doesn't always mean a whole lot, but here's a simple example here. Equal LEN, think of it as being short for length. What's the length of cell A2? How many characters are found over there? And you look at it, 7, we got 3 characters, decimal point 2 characters, and the trailing minus, there's 7 characters there. Now again, by itself, that doesn't mean a whole lot, but when it comes to picking apart this information and doing something with it, that's going to come into play. Now, as I write the function here, I want to be sure that we can see it clearly as well as A2, so I want to make the column wider temporarily at least so we can see this clearly. So the first thing we need to do here is to find out if the rightmost character is a minus. And in other cases, for example, in A3 and A5 it isn't, but we want to cover both bases. So we're looking first of all to see if the rightmost character, so we use the text function right. We're looking here, comma, we're looking at the one character on the right. Is that equal to, and we got to put it in double quotes, a minus, comma. Well, if it is, what is it we want to do? We want to pick everything up out of that cell A2 to the left of the hyphen. So we need to use the left function, and the numbers may vary. They could be in the hundreds of thousands, the tens of thousands. So the number of characters we pick up from the left here needs to be 1 less than the length of the entry in A2. So the number of characters we need, that's the next part of the argument here for left, will be the length of A2 minus 1. Now, this portion of the formula right here, if we could look at it for the moment, contains 345.45. What we need to do with that is to multiply it by -1 because we truly want to take those numerical entries there, that the pure numbers, and make sure they come up as a negative. So we can put in asterisk -1, comma. So if we do find the rightmost character being a minus, this is what we want to do with the data. If we do not find a minus on the right-hand side, we simply want to use the data as it is and enter. Now, don't necessarily count on seeing the hyphen here. That has to do with formatting. And so that cell might have been formatted earlier. If you go to format cells, you'll know there are lots of options for number. Currently, this is the one in place. Now, you don't necessarily have to show the leading hyphen. You might prefer this style or this style, so that's a different issue, and let's not confuse them. This may be for some people more common style. In an accounting environment, they like this look, so they might do that. And we certainly will be able to copy these down to the other cells. But the formatting issue is a different one. But you see what's happening here in all cases here. We've cleaned up the data, and we can use math with these. We can format them. We now have values at our disposal, and that simple little example I used before where I took this and doubled it. Now if we do that, that works just fine. So that's a creative use of using 3 different functions there, right and left and len together. And those are the things that make these text functions really valuable. You don't always sense their value when you're seeing them in an isolated case. Now, another situation I hear about from time to time is what's occurring in column E. Perhaps these are code numbers and you're not about to use them in any computational sense, but you want them to look like this. And I think you know what happens if you type leading zeros. If you haven't done any kind of special formatting ahead of time, you type leading zeros and they disappear. And some people discover that with zip codes, that's a different issue. You can format those for zip codes and avoid that, but different situation here. we've got a whole bunch of numbers like this. And again, imagine thousands of these. Maybe you gotta make them look like this. And I hear little horror stories every so often where people gotta have 100 of these and they retype them and format them as text and so on and so on. There are simpler ways. And what we want to do here is to simply write a formula that does this for us. And this is using a function called text. We simply want to take this data, comma, and no matter how many entries we have here, and let's say whoever has made the decision here, everything should be displayed as a 5-digit character, and wherever necessary, put in the leading zeros. So the format will be double quote, and the text function does require that you put in a format, and perhaps a little bit of knowledge of formatting in Excel is valuable here, but the simple example here is pretty straightforward. 5 zeros. Double quote, that's it. Looks like that. And the other data which has been put in manually, we'll change those so that this all works too. So these are, in each case here, simply the data to the left with leading zeros. Now, those are text entries, and it's highly unlikely that you need to treat these as values, but if you tried to add these, Excel looks upward first, doesn't see any numbers, and if you tried to do this anyway, if you overrode what it tried to do there, you would get this. Now, sometimes what you can do too is, and I wouldn't say this is necessary, but you could say, let's add these up anyway, but you'd have to turn those into values. Another function that occasionally comes into play is a function called a value. And this takes data like this, which contains numbers, but they're not really values, they're text. We want to convert those all into values. And because we're trying to do this across multiple cells and get the total at the same time, this would need to be an array formula. So we press Control-Shift-Enter. And that is the total of those. Now again, maybe that's a little unusual. You probably won't use that a whole lot, but if here and there you did have entries that were text entries, you can turn them into values. Possibly here we might do equal value. If you want to do it this way too, on each one of these, we don't need any formatting there. There we go. And just tick these down there. So that's another need from time to time. Now, here's another issue too, and it's actually related to that first example. You can create your own format, and if you want negatives, and I wouldn't exactly recommend it because it's inconsistent with a lot of other displays in Excel. It's not an innate one built in. But you can create your own format so that for negative numbers, you'll have a trailing hyphen. Now as I click on this and you look in the formula bar, the value of this is minus 34.56. The format you can create for this, and there are quite a few variations, simply clicking the right mouse button here and going right into Format Cells, you'll see here a custom format. And you can do this pretty easily by starting with one of the formats here that has two kinds of layouts. Whenever you see a semicolon here, and one example on each side of it, the one to the left is how the data is displayed when it's positive or 0. The entry to the right is how it's displayed when it's negative. So you might just click one of these, adjust it slightly, put in a trailing minus, and that's simply the format here for negative numbers. And again, I'm not strongly recommending that, but it is possible to actually have this look and have it be treated as a value. So in this case, in this situation here, we've seen a number of different uses of text functions pulled together. Putting them together in interesting ways sometimes does allow us to do some really creative things with massaging our data and getting it into the shape that we really want it to be in.